Over the past several decades, a number of scholars and commentators have come to the conclusion that the leading edge of the global economy has become driven by technologies based on knowledge production and dissemination, heralding the emergence of a knowledge-based economy and society. With the advent of information technology today, there are major changes in how people look at knowledge, create it, and apply it. This time is now widely recognized as the beginning of what has come to be called the knowledge age, an advanced form of economy in which knowledge and ideas are the main sources of economic value added. Today, the most important inputs to the core economic activities of the most advanced economies are widely distributed in the population. This is not a condition that we used to be in. This goes for both information and knowledge, and it is a systemic transformation upon which many changes will take place in the coming decades, as it lays the foundations for a true knowledge society. In the same way, that information became alive and something real to the mass of people with the advent of the personal computer, mobile phone, and the Internet. Knowledge is now also becoming something much more alive and real. The meaning of knowledge is changing in a fundamental way. Knowledge is no longer being thought of as stuff that is developed and stored in the minds of experts, represented in books, and classified into disciplines. It is starting to flow in all directions. Increasingly, the nature of knowledge will change as it becomes dynamic, present, and real in everything that people do. It is increasingly part of our work, part of the media we consume, the websites we visit, the stuff that businesses are calling out for, and that people see as critical to the development of their economies. This is the emergence of a knowledge society. A knowledge society can be understood as a society where organizations are built to enable the creation, dissemination, and use of knowledge as it becomes the primary social and economic activity. The realization of a knowledge society implies the modification of all other forms of economic activity, primary sector, industrial activity, and information services, which become reconfigured as systems for enabling the realization of new innovation and ideas. What distinguishes a knowledge economy from all others is the shift of value creation to an integrated process through which new ideas are generated and applied to economic development within one seamless process. The author George Gilder once noted that the Neanderthal in his cave had the same material resources that we command today. The difference between the Stone Age and our age of luxury today is entirely the accumulation of knowledge. Since the origins of society, knowledge has always played a critical role. However, these societies were, in a concrete sense, shaped primarily by their physical limitations that defined the structure to the organization and the parameters to their operation. A society without industrial technologies or information technologies is one that is shaped primarily by physical constraints. It is strongly confined by its geographical locality, the need for the mass of society to be engaged in the production of food, material, and energy sources. Knowledge within such a society remains the purview of a tiny minority. The generation, implementation of new knowledge is typically a lengthy process, and there are many other dominant sources of value creation and power within economy and society. In this respect, societies are often classified according to the primary resource that is being processed and the economic system through which it is transformed into the desired resources. An agrarian economy processes natural resources through the use of animal and human muscle within an agricultural system. An industrial society uses machines and artificial energy sources to process physical resources into manufactured goods. An information society uses computers to process data into information. In the same way, a knowledge society uses intelligence to process information into knowledge. Each stage in economic development involves a process whereby we increase the efficiency of the system doing the processing so that the desired resource becomes cheaper and more widely available and thus a commodity as people come to take it for granted. Through the process of industrialization, People today take the mass-produced goods that enable their everyday life for granted, and increasingly we take computers for granted as they become ever more pervasive within society. As a resource becomes a commodity, the marginal surplus value for the producer is reduced, while the value surplus for the producers increases further up the value chain. In this way, industrialization has played a central part in the rise of a knowledge economy, in that it commoditized physical production. By the end of industrialization, the making of products is largely a commodity activity, with the value moving more towards organization. In realizing a knowledge economy, not only do we need industrialization to commoditize the physical building blocks, but we also need information technology to commoditize the organizing of these elementary parts. Organization is the essence of information, and information and communications technology allow us to organize our world with ever greater ease, ever faster, and at an ever lower cost. Mass automation of services is the end result of the information revolution and the starting condition for the knowledge economy. The information revolution of the past couple of decades has switched the flow of information and ideas from slow, linear, and scarce to fast, networked, and pervasive, giving rise to the potential for a society where knowledge and its usage is the central resource, a new form of innovation economy based on knowledge and its application through information systems. A knowledge economy is what emerges out of the information revolution, as it is enabled by it among a number of dimensions. Information technology enables new forms of networked organization that can be independent of the physical constraints of proximity, enabling them to connect and coordinate around ideas and interests instead of physical constraints. Information technology puts the means of knowledge creation in the hands of many, creating nonlinear, two-way network socioeconomic structures, where individuals participate in the processing and exchanging of knowledge within large information-based networks. These open networks become central means of value generation within society, and created by an ever wider percentage of citizens as sources of information and expertise. With IT, knowledge stops being a monolithic and exclusive thing created by a few experts, but becomes granular and accessible for the many to contribute small amounts of specific knowledge, like Wikipedia. Lastly, information technology enables us to work with and exchange knowledge in new ways. Where previously knowledge was largely confined to text and existing in rather static books, with new media, knowledge becomes something much more real. It becomes alive and fluid in image, audio, and video. Throughout history, we have relied on text to exchange information, but increasingly we are using images and audio which we are more attuned to, and vastly more information can be exchanged much faster through image and audio than text. At the same time, this technology enables a two-way dialogue, an interactive process where information can be continuously written, read, rewritten, updated, etc. Our knowledge base shifts from largely static to primarily dynamic. No longer written once and then read many times, it becomes dynamic, continuously updated, with continuous feedback loops between producer and consumer. The mass automation that is being brought about by information technology is likewise one of the central enablers of the knowledge revolution that is currently underway. Information technology is developing into a new stage characterized by smart systems, sometimes called artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, or machine learning. This stage is set to automate basic information processing and the many services that are dependent upon it, such as much of financial trading, customer support, driving cars, processing legal documents, medical diagnostics, etc. Previously, decisions were made by people processing information in real time and often making decisions on the fly in small groups, being strongly influenced by the particularities of those individuals. What this automation of information processing allows us to do is shift that decision-making up a level. Instead of it being made over and over again by people in response to each event, the general class of problem is studied by researchers within the domain who then implement an algorithm that automates the decision-making process. This is a key component to understanding the knowledge revolution that is underway. For example, until just a decade ago, financial trading was done by masses of people making decisions on the fly, based largely on their intuition, practical models, heuristics, and limited knowledge. Today, most of these trades are made by computers based on algorithms created by financial experts, computer scientists, physicists, and mathematicians. The same will be true for many other activities as they increasingly get run through platforms in the coming decades. Basic information services will become automated by smart systems and become available through the distributed cloud on demand. This is important because it shifts the decision-making from the information level to the level of knowledge. We can now make a much higher level of investment in researching and developing the knowledge once, and then implementing that so that it is automated. The end result is this move up the value chain into the knowledge economy, a shift from people processing information with practical knowledge to a more formal, abstract type of knowledge. As industrialization has worked to remove the physical barriers to organization, the move into a knowledge and information society drives a shift towards systems of organization based on the inherent limitations of information and knowledge. Understanding this inherent quality and nature of knowledge and information then becomes critical to understanding the emergent organizational structures that will form as technology enables this move away from a context defined by physical constraints and into a new form of information environment. In information science, this information environment is structured into a hierarchical form through what is called the information pyramid or information hierarchy. The DIKW framework forms a fundamental ordering principle to information and knowledge environments. In this world of information, it tells us what is the same and what is qualitatively different. It is like a map that tells us where the true limitations lie. Going up the hierarchy means increasing abstraction, context, human input, meaning, and value. Typically, information is defined in terms of data, knowledge in terms of information, and wisdom in terms of knowledge. This is because as we move up the levels, we go through a synthesizing process, where we are combining or putting together the building blocks below to create something new. As we put things together, it requires choosing how things are put together, and thus an increasing importance to context, human agency, and meaning as we go up the hierarchy. Going down means taking things apart, what is called analysis, a reduction in meaning and context, and an increase in the potential for automation. The move from an industrial economy to an information and knowledge economy then, in turn, necessitates a deep transformation in the structure and functioning of organizations. Today, our organizations are built around all kinds of constraints other than knowledge. Schools are based on the age of students. Business organizations are based on predefined roles and the authority ascribed to them. Politics is based on geography, and many of the other organizations within our societies are based on money, gender, ethnicity, location, or some other physical aspect. The idea of a knowledge society, though, is the idea that social organizations would primarily be based on knowledge, that organizations would form based on people's interests and the collective processing of ideas within network structures to generate value. A learning or knowledge organization is one that is designed to enable the flow of knowledge. Organization structure is designed so that the greatest quantity and quality of knowledge is created and applied to making decisions, and that the organization executes on the decisions made. It differs from traditional forms of hierarchical organization in that it actually needs individuals that think at all levels of the organization, not simply professionals. It requires both abstract knowledge but also practical knowledge, and the two to be working together. The idea of a knowledge society is the idea that people are generators of knowledge, ideas, and innovation, every member of society, not just a small fraction. A knowledge society then uses knowledge holistically, not in a discrete, centralized fashion. Knowledge organizations enable the shift from the mass form of organization of an industrial society to more personalized organizations that are designed to develop the individual and their interests. Through social networking, they connect to and follow those people who have similar interests to themselves, and thus with whom they process ideas within networks. With the widespread advent of information technology, smart systems, mass automation, globalization, the huge rise in literacy and basic education, the infrastructure for a knowledge economy is increasingly taking shape. The implications of the knowledge revolution are indeed radical in nature, as it implies the restructuring of socioeconomic institutions as networks for the fostering, development, and implementation of knowledge. This is a radical idea in that most of our social institutions are currently designed along very different lines.